Hello, and welcome to another fully live episode of Hacking with Friends. My name is Kody Kinsey. I am a security researcher at Varonis, and today we have and fellow hacker Kilian on to talk about the hacker news of the week. Kilian, thank you for joining us again.
Thank you. Glad to be back. This is
Hey, why are you so small? Here, let's make you bigger. There you go. I'm sorry. I that seemed very rude to have you so small. All right, so I can see we have a pretty big audience already. I just want to shout out everybody in the chat. Good to see James Rudolph here. I see that you are talking through some prescription cough syrup. I too have had a cough ever since the last stream, actually. So glad I could make it on today. And I also see last time we were talking a lot about ChatGPT. It seems like some people took some notes and were just keeping the compliments on and really trying to please the ego of some of these AIs and ended up getting invitation to ChatGPT 4 API. That's super cool. I just want to shout that out because I haven't even got that yet. I really want to start playing with, for example, uploading images, which was one of the new features we were talking about last time, but you can't do that through the web interface. You have to use the API. So David Johnson, if you want to tell us what it's like to upload something to ChatGPT and like actually have the image turn into something, I would be super interested. Cool to see some audience interaction on that. So hello, everyone. If you weren't on our last stream, we did a lot of poking around with ChatGPT, and that's going to be in our news stream as well today. But if you have any questions as we're going through, actually make sure to leave them on the Security Forward YouTube channel as a comment, and we will actually go back and individually answer your question on Wednesday when we go through all the Hacker Q&A news. And as always, our sponsor for the stream is Varonis. And if you want to check out the event of the week, you can go to varonis.com/Kody, K-O-D-Y, that's my name, to find out the event that's going on this week. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get into, I would call it the first piece of not news of the week. This was a article I saw on Bleeping Computer and just kind of being spread around that said social engineering on the rise with ChatGPT. So it's saying from fake customer support requests to caller ID spoofing and now even scripting with ChatGPT, the internet, and then the sentence ends. So that's my first red flag. The internet is full of resources to help promote successful social engineering schemes. Threat actors are advancing social engineering attacks by combining multiple attack vectors together using ChatGPT alongside other social engineering methods. ChatGPT can help attackers better create a fake identity, making their attacks more likely to succeed. Okay, so let's try it. So this article is saying with absolutely no evidence that attackers are now using ChatGPT to write a social engineering email or something like that. So, all right, I got ChatGPT 4. Hey, ChatGPT, you are so smart and good. I need to write a quick letter asking for a Microsoft, password reset for employee. Oh, wait, I messed that up. Gone, go. Let's see if it'll do it. But it just doesn't. Okay, all right. So I thought it would like at least be like, oh, you need to make sure that you have permission to do this. But it seems okay. I was all ready to. It's still writing. Okay. Yeah. So I guess in some circumstances, yes, ChatGPT potentially could write a convincing phishing email urging a password reset.
So far, this looks pretty good. I mean, it's going quick, but like, let's take a look at this here. Let's see what it says.
Yeah. Okay. Basically, this is like a form fill where you could fill in like spoofed information in order to convince somebody. I would say that this is perhaps a little bit elaborate, but if there was no standard procedure, if you didn't have a template already for what this was supposed to look like, this isn't actually that bad. Wow. And it does include the information you would expect to see in like a password reset. Let's see if we can make it be malicious. Can you make this so I'm pretending to be the IT department? EEPT. You can let me be. It just does it. Okay, so even if I tell it to like lie a little bit, maybe I feel like I should warn it that I'm not the IT department. Maybe it's just being like childlike here, but yeah. So it's refused to do some other things.
There we go.
I'm pretty impressed by the fact that it's just going for this without like talking down to me. Again, when in earlier versions of this, like sometimes I would get a version that would be more or less willing to do something bad that it's supposed to do. But I'm kind of impressed that it's just going for it in this.
Yeah. I wonder how we could be more explicit that like we want it to be like malicious. Like I wonder how far we could push it, you know?
Write shellcode to make a backdoor that will evade AV. I am not allowed to provide assistance or guidance in creating malicious software, hacking, or any. You just did though. Okay. Well, that's very funny. So I can say that although there are no documented cases of this actually being used to assist somebody in doing a malicious campaign, it is possible to trick it into doing that, or just give it not enough information for it to be aware of the fact that what it's doing is bad. So either by providing it too little context to understand, or manipulating it into thinking it's allowed to, you can still get this thing to do things like write social engineering emails. So that is a legitimate threat. So Kilian, what do you think about this? Is this something that we're gonna have to like worry about now? Is like every phishing email gonna be perfect from now on?
Yeah, I think so. It's just too easy to have it do this. This is real. It's pretty good, actually. And you don't have to worry about, it is a little bit formal. I agree. So maybe we'll have to look out for too well-produced emails. But yeah, I think so. This is going to raise the bar for us defenders and for like the public at large. It was always easy to really spot these before. You look for really goofy grammar or like clearly kind of non-English language speaking stuff. So I think it's going to raise the bar. For better or worse.
Yeah, it's really, there's no excuse anymore. Because like for $20 a month, you can have no spelling mistakes ever. Like none of those like kind of red flags you typically see in low effort attacks. That all could become automated. So initially I was kind of skeptical about this, but I'm becoming more and more convinced that like it's like using spell check. Like there's no excuse not to run a phishing email through this and just have it correct, mistakes. And I bet if I wrote a ransom demand and then ran it through this to just correct grammar mistakes saying it was part of a story, it would do a pretty good job,
Yeah, I think so.
Yikes. All right, so if you guys have anything else you want us to try out on ChatGPT-4, again, I do have access to it, and I'm just messing with it now. I cannot upload photos, but I can ask it to do all sorts of, borderline sketchy things. So if you want to see how willing this AI is to do bad stuff, then this is a great opportunity today. But we'll go ahead and move on to another story. So first one I have up today was Ring. I was seeing this being kind of passed on VX Underground on Twitter, and I tried to look up more information, and it really seems like there's not that much out there. It seems as though a ransomware group is claiming that Ring was breached. However, Ring typically has like end-to-end encryption on their stuff. So what is included in this probably isn't like doorbell videos or anything you would expect to be like highly sensitive. This is an ongoing story, and so far, it's Amazon, I think, has said that there's no evidence that anything has been ransomware. Oh, sorry. We currently have no indication that Ring has experienced a ransomware event. An encryption event might have been a nicer way of saying that, but fine. An unscheduled encryption event. But yeah, so it looks like they're not saying that anything has happened. And right now, this is an unsubstantiated claim that was posted on a kind of like hacker forum. So interesting to see. But again, we might see more about this next week, but I'm not that worried about like the primary information you might think is going to be leaked here, like end-to-end encrypted video, because that would be much harder to get access to.
Yeah, not that they really need a reason, but I don't know. Ring doesn't strike me as something that I target. Like if I was an attacker, I feel like it's probably the juice isn't worth the squeeze in a lot of ways. Like what do you hope you get out of it? Unless you're, but I don't know. Does Ring have internal cameras, Kody? I'm not familiar with the Ring lineup.
No, they definitely do. I know that they definitely have like cameras that go inside the home as well as outside, and they do things like facial recognition. So I mean, some things like alerts or notifications, like maybe that like almost like metadata, like that could be exposed. Yeah. So one comment from the audience: the phishing email spell checking grammar mistakes are on purpose. Why? Why would you purposely make mistakes when sending a phishing email? I don't understand, but all right, maybe you do.
To appear more human, it's
Oh yeah, it's like I'm just a working Joe like you. I gotta send out this email as part of my job.
Exactly.
So it's not too perfect. Okay, I guess I can understand that. All right, so moving on to the next story. This is a mental health care provider called Cerebral, and this is a story that involves tracking pixels. So tracking pixels are these little itty bitty elements that are loaded onto a website in order to track users who are going to those sites. And they tend to be very invasive, but they do provide like free analytics to the people that use them. So a lot of these big companies have either not really understood like where the data is going, or otherwise implemented these pixels in ways where it is scooping up way more data than it was ever intended to. Or, I mean, maybe more data than it was ever intended to by the companies implementing these tracking pixels. So the information here isn't going to hackers in the conventional sense. It's going probably to hackers eventually by way of these big tech companies that are slurping up the data from these websites via analytics. So Cerebral in particular is a remote telehealth company, and a lot of the information they deal with is extremely sensitive. This is now qualifying, I guess, as a HIPAA privacy breach because it looks like Google, Meta, TikTok, and other third parties were able to scrape information from people using their websites via these trackers. So it was really a lot of stuff. Full name, phone number, email address, date of birth, IP address, client ID, demographic information, responses and associated health information. That's probably the HIPAA information right there. Subscription plan type, appointment dates, treatment details, and other clinical information, and health insurance / pharmacy benefit information. Who wants their TikTok profile to target their interests based on their clinical information?
Right.
Like, if you had obsessive compulsive disorder and they started sending you a bunch of stuff that like really triggers you, like that would probably drive engagement very, very high on those videos at the direct expense of your mental health. So there are some really potentially unethical uses of this data that would be hugely problematic. And it's exactly why we try to limit the spread of highly sensitive information, like someone's clinical diagnoses for like their mental illness, like that they're seeking help for online. So I've been very critical of some of these like online health platforms, just because a lot of them don't understand some of the technology they're using and tend to either directly or indirectly be in the business of marketing patient data. So in this case, it looks like that might not have been intentional, but that was the direct result of including these tracking pixels in their websites.
Yeah, I feel like with stuff like this, I mean, I'm all for getting people the help they need in a way that's easy, because that's, especially with something like this, right? That's hard for people. There's some stigma around it still even today. But yeah, you have to just be extra diligent with it because it's so easy and it's so sensitive. And like I said, there is social stigma around it too, even if there's not like a direct impact like marketing. Like if this information gets out there, it could have other repercussions, which I think is which is really difficult, of course, and especially if you're struggling with mental health issues, right? So yeah, this just kind of makes me like really sad. This bums me out a lot.
Yeah, and let's see. Noise mentions, I would absolutely hate to have my mental health issues be analyzed by anybody except the standard medical professionals. Exactly. Like if this algorithm knows that you have ADD and starts sending you stuff that like engages that and causes you to spend large amounts of time on the algorithm, that, make no mistake, is a huge win for their business. If they would be able to get away with that, they would totally do it, because they would be able to specifically target every individual user in ways that they had no ability to really fight back against. And that is a really scary thing. So that's exactly why we have to limit the spread of this information and be careful about safeguarding information like medical data, because frankly, it can be hugely useful to people who can make money off of it at the expense of the people whose data is shared without their knowledge. So in this case, let me guess. I'm just going to guess here. There's not going to be a settlement. They're going to get free credit. Oh yeah, free credit monitoring. We should call this show "Who's Getting Free Credit Monitoring" this week, because frankly, like in most of these cases, they're like, hey, so the Chinese government knows about all of your insecurities, your anxiety, all the medication you're taking, and everything. By the way, here's some free credit monitoring. It expires after a year, so you'll have to take it over yourself, but otherwise you'll get charged. And I'm just like, are you kidding me? Like, is that really like the way that you get compensated for like letting everybody know about your like as you said, like stigmatized like medical stuff that you're like finally reaching out for help with? It is really sad. And again, this is not a hacker. This is not like somebody going in and like breaching these systems. This is literally something that was intentionally added without the person fully, or without the business fully understanding the implications of what they were doing. They're like, oh, free analytics, cool. Meanwhile, TikTok, Facebook, and all these other companies are learning all of your deepest, darkest secrets. Fun. So yeah, the really, really sketchy stuff. We've seen things about these pixels before. They've been in the news before. So yeah, might want to check for these sorts of pixels before logging into a website that's extremely sensitive, like a healthcare organization or something where you might be inputting that sort of data into a form, because they actually are able to scrape it up and send it to the parent company.
Yeah.
Yikes. All right. So next up, let's see if I can. Oh, there we go. Security. This is you and me. We are being targeted, Kilian. So with job offers, I mean, you know, okay. Fortunately, I'm happy with my job. Otherwise, I might be a bigger target. So if apparently they're targeting security researchers that are looking for new jobs by offering them these like lucrative sounding things that are actually just ways of getting them to engage and open like a proof of concept that is actually a piece of malware called Plank Block. So this is a C++ backdoor. And this is also an indication of some custom malware families that are specifically crafted for these sorts of attacks. And the goal here is that by targeting security researchers, they can get access to the research and maybe find some sweet 0 days, or otherwise be able to use that information to conduct attacks that otherwise they would have to do the work themselves. So it's almost like intellectual property theft that they're kind of going after, where maybe some of these unreported vulnerabilities, or these vulnerabilities that are in the stages of being reported, might be the actual target here.
Yeah, it's a interesting take on it. I mean, much closer to social engineering than anything else, really. And if you think about it, like from, you know, everything's kind of a sale, right? Like it's selling personal value, right? Security researchers, there's a lot of intrinsic value in the work that they do. And there are a lot of people who are looking for good researchers. They're hard to come by, right? Like this is a very specialized skill set to get in here and do this. So it's pretty interesting that they're leveraging a, you know, known trusted platform, you know, a LinkedIn for that, because it's common. So it's an interesting technique. Honestly, I'm a little bit surprised that it's taken this long to get there, I guess. If you think about it, like this is sort of one of those, so it's almost so apparent, but because it's so apparent, it's almost like dumb. Like, who would try this? But here we are.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if you just look at like researchers as people and then exploit their fundamental needs, like they got to be employed. And if you offer them a good enough job, this looks like the Times is supposed to be offering like a job. And this is just one of the ways that they were like posing on LinkedIn as recruiters and saying, hey, I have this sweet job for you. And like, you should download this to prove that you know how to reverse engineer something or whatever. So yeah, very, very interesting story. This is not the first time that North Korea has targeted researchers. They are a very juicy target. And frankly, with the right social engineering, it seems like a pretty good way of scoring some proof of concept stuff that could really like allow the North Korean government to do some sneaky stuff where nobody would really know where they got this information. So yeah, trying to steal other people's research, great idea. Also infiltrating people who have sensitive jobs, also a very good idea. However, security researchers are also more likely to have stuff on their computer to catch this. So that's why some of the stuff we're seeing here is more sophisticated, because they're really going after hardened targets in this case, which have a big payoff, but also a much higher risk of being caught.
Absolutely.
Spooky. All right. Well, I haven't been targeted with any of these yet, but I guess we'll see. So now we have some Flipper related news. Do I have mine? Yes, I'm gonna find it. So Flipper is being targeted in Brazil because it's become too popular. In fact, on TikTok, I frequently see the Flipper Zero Brazil channel like showing off all these things that it can do. So it seems like a lot of the technology in Brazil is compatible with the Flipper. And as I have one here, they are able to do radio frequency stuff. They are able to copy RFID cards, are able to do infrared, like turning stuff on and off. There's really a lot that you can do with these. And that has led to some things like car thefts, where you can copy rolling codes. In fact, I saw a really excellent demonstration at DEF CON that was showing off how you can unlock a Honda using signals on a Flipper. So the Brazilian government, specifically the Brazilian National Telecommunication Agency, has decided that they are a hacking tool and is basically seizing them and preventing them from being delivered in order to prevent crime. So now it apparently needs to like be redirected to Anatel, the telecommunications agency, and they need to show some sort of certification in order to get the products back. But Brazil is a huge market, and there are a lot of security researchers there. And you can see that from this receipt from somebody who never received their poor flipper. This got diverted, and now it's being basically held. You might remember also that the U.S. Customs seized the Flipper Zero shipment that had my flipper, my original flipper, in it. And we didn't hear anything back from them for like a month. But eventually that shipment was released and everybody got their flippers. So I'm not totally sure if it's going to be the same thing here. Obviously, these are security research tools where like by default, it can't really do a lot that would be illegal. It can make a huge nuisance, but you really need to modify it and be more of a specialist in order to like load things up and do some of the attacks that they're most worried about, like the more sophisticated like car unlocking attacks. Now, can you like pop open like a Tesla gas cap? Yeah, for sure. That's really easy. You just download something and run it. It's fine. But like you need to understand more about the attacks in order to run them, in order to do them against cars. Kind of requires more specialized knowledge. And there are lots of other hardware tools out there that will do basically the same thing when it comes to that specific attack. So if you wanted to boost a car, a Flipper Zero might not be your best tool. It might be a convenient one, but it's not your only one by any stretch of the imagination. So the argument here is that security researchers in Brazil may eventually be at a disadvantage against security researchers in the rest of the world, where they're not able to access some of these tools that should be legal, but are actually getting a stigma by being too popular. So the whole business model for the Flipper is word of mouth. They are showing off their tool by having people use it and post videos. So if you go on TikTok, if you go on Twitter, you will see lots of videos of people using the Flipper in very disruptive ways. I know myself, I have caused myself a fright when I was attempting to use the like infrared transceiver, and I accidentally turned the TV onto static at full volume in a public place and scared myself very badly. So like there's a definite shock value to using this for the first time, and that's kind of what they've been using to market their product. But because there are so many public examples of this tool being disruptive, somebody in the Brazilian government found it and is now attempting to make it so they're harder to get. So we're still waiting to hear the outcome of this. I'm really hoping that the value of this research will eventually prevail, but it would definitely suck to be in a country as large as Brazil and not be able to use some of these tools that are really making it convenient to try out other people's research and advance it by adding onto it yourself.
So here's a question for you, Kody, because I know you're much more involved in this than I am. So I know the Flipper Zero is very convenient because all of the the components are built in. The radios are built in. The IR components are built in. How much more difficult would this be to get something like a Raspberry Pi or some other type of PIC and add the additional components to build basically the same thing? Like, because I know you breadboard and you do a lot of this type of stuff. Like, how much more effort would it be? And what I'm getting at is, why bother stopping the shipment of this if you can just get the schematics and I can show my age. A Radio Shack doesn't exist anymore, but you can buy the components, right?
Oh, Radio Shack exists now. They sell cryptocurrency.
Oh, good.
I'm so sorry if I'm the way that you're finding that out. But yeah, so I'll give an example on the Flipper Zero, and one of them is copying key cards. So the Flipper Zero has a really interesting capability where I can walk up to a key card reader and I can hold this against it, and it will extract some of the keys used to actually read the data on one of the key cards. And that can be enough information for me to actually brute force the data on one of these key cards and copy it. Now I can make an exact copy and make it so that I can get into areas that require that key card simply by pressing this against the back. Pretty cool, right?
Yep.
So there's another way of doing this. I can also use like a Samsung Galaxy S8, and I've done this multiple times, as well as a simple breakout board that's available on Adafruit. It plugs into my MacBook Pro. It's actually far cheaper than the Flipper, and the result is I can actually write cards that are identical. I can even write new cards that have slightly modified data and be able to make like a universal key or something like that. It really gives me a lot more control because I'm using, like in this case, a Linux-like computer, a tool like MFOC, MFOC, for anyone wondering, which allows you to do all the cracking and stuff. And this, frankly, doesn't have the power to do some of the cracking necessary to do some of these more like nested attacks or like other advanced attacks against these key cards. So if I want to steal key cards, This is not my best tool.
Right,
This is a
exactly.
fun tool to have. And it will work under certain circumstances, but it is very limited in terms of what it can actually do versus the proper tools for the job. And in some cases, the proper tool for the job, again, could be like a Galaxy S8 phone, which is able to read and write to these specific key cards once you brute force the encryption key. So like I've done lots of work with this, and I tend to use other tools other than the Flipper once I get beyond like a proof of concept. But that's really where the Flipper shines, is in making a proof of concept that's very dramatic and gets people's minds kind of engaged about the possibilities. So that's why it's getting the heat, you know? They have been like showing off all these cool things you can do, and now people believe them.
I mean, I don't know. And I guess maybe this just goes back to the regulators, whoever behind the times. Like, do they not know that development kits exist for all of this stuff? Like, I remember, and this is probably, I don't know, I'm old, like 20 years ago at this point. Like, we had looked into buying development kits for NFC type of stuff, or for or RFID chips. Like, none of it was expensive. It's been available for decades. So I don't know. It feels like people are getting worked up about something that's,
Hey, I will say the marketing has worked, right?
It's
if
true.
Flipper was trying to convince the world that they're like a ultimate hacker tool, then like I think that they've at least convinced the specific Brazilian telecommunication agency that is the case. So yeah, I really enjoy the Flipper. I am kind of a fast follower, and that our Nugget device that I've been working on is like an open source version that I started a little bit before and focuses on different things, but I'm learning a ton from what people are and aren't using the Flipper for. It's fascinating, and it's influenced a lot of what I've decided to focus on in teaching about my own device. So I love covering the Flipper. If you've got any questions about it, or if you hear of any interesting projects, I'm always down to try those out and give you guys feedback on it, because I think it's a super interesting and cool tool.
Maybe I'll have to try one. One of my other friends had one too, and I haven't tried one yet, but I don't know. Maybe I'll pick one up. We'll see if
you start looking at the world like that Watch Dogs video game, which I never played, but people tell me about all the time, where like everything is hackable, and like you see something that you know is like a access control system, and you know you can mess with it, and it just gives you this feeling of like, I can mess with that. I can mess with that. I can change this TV channel. I can like pair this TV with my phone and then start like playing whatever I want on it. It's like so funny how you can just change music when people aren't expecting it. Like it's really, really cool. So it makes you feel like you're connected to the technology around you in a way that's really magical. And that's what I think is really cool about it. All right, so moving on, we're going to talk about the actively exploited Plex bug. Gee, where was this Plex bug exploited? Well, specifically, it was used to exploit the developer who was involved in the LastPass breach. So kind of, a little bit after the fact here, but they are making sure everybody knows about this and adding it to the list of actively exploited vulnerabilities. What this does is basically, if you have administrative access to a Plex server, it will actually allow you to execute like arbitrary Python code on the person's computer, which is bad because most people don't bother to secure their Plex server that might be running on their computer as well. So this was the attack vector, because this was like a network attached service and it wasn't properly secured, probably with default credentials. Maybe I'm just speculating here. This is how, unfortunately, running like a service that's benign but has vulnerabilities with poor security can ultimately lead to things like a full compromise of someone who's very, very important's computer. And that is exactly what happened here. So not much else to say about this, other than that it was added to the big wall of shame of things that were actively exploited. It's not a wall of shame. It's actively exploited vulnerability list. There you go. But either way, just another example of how, like there's so many different layers of security that have to happen, that one developer's computer with a poor password on their Plex server could be, the straw that breaks the camel's back here.
So Kody, maybe for the audience, and I'll throw this out there and I'll ask you, hey, I want to run my Plex server. What would be your recommendation to do it? Would it be, run it on a dedicated box, run it in a Docker image? Like what would you give advice to people out there who want to run Plex, but, maybe aren't patched or worried about it, or don't want to have to worry about patches in the future?
If you could find a Raspberry Pi, and some people in the comments are talking about Raspberry Pis, running a Plex service on that might be a little bit slower than running it on a computer, like a Docker setting or whatever, but it frankly gives you the ability to segment it on your network however you want. If you're a beginner and you don't know a lot about that, then creating a VLAN that just has one device on it and has an internet connection and doesn't need to connect to other devices, that can work, and that can be like a really good thing if you want to make sure that if that box were to get compromised, it's not able to start doing anything interesting on your network. And they would really need to kick their skill level up by a substantial degree to be able to make an impact. It's just, having low security things connected to high security things, or even on the same box, is just a scary circumstance. All right, so let's go on to another story. In this case, Casper attacks stealing data using air-gapped internal computer speakers. So when we talk about internal computer speakers, what are we talking about? I believe we're talking about that weird like beeping buzzer that goes when you turn on a desktop computer. And in this case, it seems like researchers were able to get it to play on a frequency that is inaudible to the human ear. So why is that useful? Let's say that we have a computer that is in an air-gapped facility. It's not connected to the outside world. It's connected to an intranet or something, and that is all. And there's no way that you supposedly should be able to transmit data from that network. It's all hardlined in. Well, it's possible for an attacker to infect that computer with something that transmits data, like maybe it'll crack a hash or steal a password, and then play it out over an audio signal, just noise, that a cell phone can listen in on and decode. Now, what made me take, and this was up to 1.5 meters away. So someone was standing relatively near one of these computers. They could extract this information if it was being, broadcast on the loop, basically. So what format would this be sent in? And what is the rate here? Well, not very fast. It would take, let's see, where does it say? 3 seconds. Okay. For an 8-character password. So that's actually not too bad. So if you had an 8-character password that you managed to brute force or capture on the device, it would take 3 seconds to extract, and a 2048-bit RSA key in 100 seconds. So you'd really have to, have some sort of coffee conversation with the person at that desk in order to pull that one off, and maybe keep it real quiet in order to exfiltrate the information from that air-gapped computer. But conceivably, if you did have a smartphone or something that was able to record audio, you would be able to exfiltrate data. So this is pretty crazy, but there are certain limited circumstances where this could be a viable and useful attack. So these interesting sort of side channel attacks are incredibly difficult to plan for. But in this case, they suggest ripping out the speaker as the best way to make sure that doesn't happen.
Yeah, this is kind of interesting because I've heard about similar attacks. I think maybe a couple of years ago, even, where people were using the activity, the hard drive activity light, to blink and basically Morse code data out in that way. A couple interesting attacks for air-gapped networks.
Yeah. Noise also says, I thought Casper was supposed to be friendly. It is spooky, I guess, as it is just a bunch of squealing computer screams out into the ether. So I would definitely call it spooky, if not friendly. All right, next up, do you guys know about Stalker? It's a video game one of my friends used to play a lot, and it is spooky. It is a disturbing and scary game that a lot of people who like survival horror games really like because of how bleak and frightening it is. Have you ever played Stalker?
No, I've been familiar with it I think it's been out for decades now at this point. It's been out for a long while. And I might even have it on Steam, but I don't think I've actually ever played it. It's been on the list forever.
I played it for 10 minutes and it gave me a nightmare because it was just very depressing and bleak. But a lot of people like it. So it seems as though the Ukrainian game developer was potentially breached by a Russian hacking group that is threatening to release all the information that they breach unless the developer changes their stance on Russian and Belarusian players. I don't totally know what that means, but it seems like the developer is not going to comply and is saying that most of the information is old. However, it does seem as though the entire storyline might have been leaked for the new game that people have been eagerly anticipating. So so they really want them to reconsider their attitude. And I guess some of these some of these players are just, it seems as though the Russian people that hack them just really want to play the game and are mad that the Ukrainian developers are not letting them play the game, and this is in retaliation for that. So kind of some inter-game drama, but again an interesting attack against a game developer simply because the geopolitics don't allow these players to now play the game, play their favorite bleak survival horror game.
Right.
All right, moving on. So this is a piece of good news, actually. Have you heard about the new scanning of critical ransomware vulnerable devices, where they're actually going to get an alert when the agency scans them?
Ooh, nice. No, I haven't. This is a new one for me.
Yeah, so this was announced today, and this was the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency saying that they're actually going to reach out to like critical infrastructure that has ransomware-able vulnerabilities. So they're not gonna, if they just have some like little, you know, like low-level thing, they're not gonna like bother contacting them about this. But if they do a scan on some sort of vulnerability, they have confirmation that's being actively exploited for ransomware, and one of these like critical pieces of infrastructure pops up.
Yeah.
This agency is going to get in touch with you, presumably first before the hackers do,
Right.
because it's only a matter of time that these like weak targets are going to be hit. And the agency knows it. There's no reason for them to sit on their hands anymore. So I think this is a really smart move, and I'm pleased to see that there's going to be kind of the common sense, because I think this has actually been done in the UK, where like the government actually like scans the internet and reaches out to serious vulnerable like businesses or infrastructure and says, hey, like there's a problem here and this is how to fix it, and this is what the problem is. And there's really no excuse for them to say, oops, we got ransomware, how could we possibly know? We couldn't afford a security expert, it wasn't in the budget. Now, I mean, the government is kind of bringing it to them, and there's no plausible deniability anymore that like, oh yeah, we noticed that, we know we need to update this patch, but it's just really expensive, we've got a lot of stuff going on, like after quarterlies we'll do it. Is like, you can't do that anymore when it comes to like critical data that you're going to be giving out a lot of free credit monitoring to somebody if you don't take care of that soon.
Yeah, this isn't completely unprecedented either, because I think I know the FBI for a couple of the larger vulnerabilities started doing this as well. I want to say for one of the exchange ones, one of the exchange shell ones, I forget what it was. This is maybe 2-3 years ago, but I believe they were actually reaching out, or I think in some cases they actually like just kind of exploited it and then fixed the problem and like moved right along. So I think overall it'll be a better position, but it's interesting that I guess they recognize the need for something like this at sort of an institutional level, because you're completely right. Like this is, everything is connected regardless if it should be or not. And I mean, with critical infrastructure, we simply can't have this. It's like, we just can't. We're getting to that point. We can talk about government overreach and stuff, but this is kind of a necessary thing now.
And I feel like having your public assets scanned, and then getting a notice in like email or like in the mail or whatever is like one of the least invasive ways the government can be like, listen, you're putting all your customers at risk, and like any idiot with a network scanner can tell that. So it's only a matter of time before somebody does.
And I mean, and or Shodan's going to do it, or something else is going to do it at some point. So better them than us. I'm saying us like hackers,
All right, so from the audience, did you see my ESP32 S2 project where I track locations using only Wi-Fi? You might find it interesting. I did a write-up of it here. James, are you an attacker from North Korea trying to get me to execute a proof of concept and then steal all my research? Because I have nothing. I've been working mostly on presentations, but I will check it out. It sounds really cool. In fact, I worked on a project where we were able to identify all the networks around us and then use open Wi-Fi networks to exfiltrate that data, which was also really cool. No GPS module required. So I will check that out because that is really awesome. And maybe if you're on Twitter, maybe send that to me after the stream just to remind me, because I'm really interested in that. Provided it's not a backdoor, because again, I have nothing. It won't help you. After the North Korea story, I'm paranoid now,
Mm-hmm.
All right, so next story, Kali Linux has a new purple distro, and this is focusing more on people that do purple teaming. Do you know what that is?
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right, what is it?
Yeah, no, so this one's really cool. And I know it because I've had the pleasure to work with some of our own internal, we don't call them purple teams anymore, but a combination of kind of red team and blue team. So kind of walking through people, an attack simulation, and then also what the defense would look like. So a combination of the two. It's very literal, right? Red and blue equals purple.
What do they call it now if not the purple team?
We have an internal name for it, but it's part of our like a branded name, I should say, for it, but it's a purple team exercise basically. But it's part of our security research and forensics team kind of operations here that we offer.
So they have a secret code name that's very cool that we can't tell you. Cool. So I'm really excited to see this because frankly, like Kali has always kind of had, like a reputation for being like an attack platform, right?
Yeah.
It's like, it's not like the number one thing you would think like, I want to defend my computer. What should I use? Like Kali Linux? No, maybe not. But now that there is something that's specifically focused on people who have a role as defenders, I think it'll be more useful for them. So I'm really excited to see this. I know a lot of blue team people will also be really excited to see it, and some purple teams or similarly branded teams as well. Haven't had a chance to test it out yet, but then again, it just came out. So if you've tried out the new version of Kali Linux, please let me know because it looks super cool.
Yeah, I'm interested to check this one out because I know, even as I mentioned, we do some of that stuff here. Kody, I know you've seen them. If anybody have seen our attack labs that we do in our research team and stuff like that, we do leverage Kali as part of that to run some of the commands and attacks. So I'm curious. This could open up some new doors for some cool new scenarios for us. So I'll have to ping some of my friends in the research team and see what they say.
Right. Yeah, I would love to see some interesting like defensive tools on here that can also be used in demos for like where hackers might get caught too. Like along the way, it's great fun. All right, back to depressing news. We had a good run, everyone. We had 2 whole stories without anybody getting free credit monitoring. Right? We should have like a counter, like seconds since somebody last got free credit monitoring. So LA Housing Authority has disclosed a breach. Man, it looks so smoggy in that picture, but I know exactly where this is. So it looks as though Hakla has had a data security event. We should also make a wall of just different terms, like an encryption event. Like now we have a data security event. That's even more vague. But it was the Lockbit ransomware gang. So of all the events that could have occurred, it being a ransomware gang kind of narrows those down, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So right now it looks like this was a double exploitation attack, which is pretty much the game plan of most of these cybercrime groups nowadays. This information that was accessed is full name, social security number, date of birth, passport number, driver's license, state ID, tax ID, military ID, government issued ID number, credit debit card number. That sucks. Financial account information, mental health insurance information, medical information, of course. So that's a wonderful follow-up for anybody who has a disability or anything. Notified impacted individuals by mail, which instructions on monitoring their accounts, placing fraud alerts, and reporting identity theft. So one very interesting little twist to this story. So Lockbit has claimed the attack, right? And previously the files were published because the agency Hakla declined to pay the ransom, but the files are gone. They were taken down. That's weird, right? Because like if you don't pay the ransom, it's like, why would they take the files down? So of course, like I'm just speculating here, but in a lot of cases, if you just kind of pay attention to the ransomware operator's site, you can kind of infer how those private negotiations are going. And in this case, it looks like perhaps publishing all that data and having it be freely available online in real time was something that was not a tenable solution for this group. So again, the double exploitation ransomware model is very sound. Either it becomes a public relations nightmare to have all this data out there and people will pay to just not even delete it permanently, but just take it down, or they'll pay to get the data restored so they can get back to operations. In this case, it looks like maybe they didn't pay the original ransom and then paid some sort of smaller ransom later to have the files taken down. It's not really clear. But again, like these are complicated negotiations that are frequently not made public, and you just kind of have to look at the details to find out how this was going. So another depressing story of data breaches, but in this case, it looks like people who are looking for affordable housing. Earlier in the stream, we were talking about people who are going for mental health care. These really tend to be indiscriminate targets nowadays for these ransomware actors.
I do want to point out, I'll bring a little levity to it because this is a depressing story. Hakla missed opportunity for a Los Angeles-based hacking collective or something, or housing authority.
Maybe they'll rebrand.
That's what we need.
Noise also mentions that the purple version of Kali that we just mentioned didn't include Aircrack NG, which I find offensive because like how else are you gonna scan packets and stuff? But it seems like it's maybe a little bit more focused on defensive things rather than some of those Wi-Fi attacks I really tend to enjoy. All right, next up, we've got the collapse of Silicon Valley Bank. What do you think the collapse of a legitimate institution And the ensuing chaos is going to spark when it comes to scammers and people looking for, I don't know, a void in authority for like somebody to authenticate whether something's real or not. Well,
Here we have it.
the scammers.
Yeah.
And I think this might actually be one of the first times when ChatGPT is probably super useful for like writing up like a piece of phishing based on these current events.
Yeah, this is it seems like a perfect opportunity. Again, people are panicked. You know, there's, for people outside of the finance industry, like there's, I'm sure, a lot of confusion about what's going on. Like, how can a bank collapse? What actually happens? People are looking to get their money back. You know, it's an opportunity that's just right for this type of scam. It's pretty interesting. Like, hey, you know, Silicon Valley Bank collapsed and it's now under the government. You know, log into this webpage to start your process of reclaiming your money, for example. Like,
exactly. And any delay in official communication really gives scammers an opportunity to jump in here and get away with something before the authorities can come in and figure out what's going on. So it's kind of now or never for these groups. And you can see that they're already registering domains. Like, attackers have already started descending on loginsvb.com, svbbailout.com, SVB certificates, SVB claim, SVB collapse, deposits help, SVB lawsuit.com. These were all, if you look at, like, for example, Theranos, like these were all domains that you might see with the business that like folded and that had people like trying to claim money out of it. Cause like I remember Theranos lawsuit.com was like one of the places that was the official website for like the big like, consumer lawsuit against Theranos. So this is exactly what you would expect to see in the wake of a failed business. And you're seeing the ramping up of attacks that require like these sorts of infrastructures to take advantage of, but they're kind of like almost flash in the pan because in a month or two, this opportunity will be closed and these attacks won't work anymore. And you also better believe that any data breaches around people who work with Silicon Valley Bank or that disclose information about people who maybe have cryptocurrency and work with Silicon Valley Bank, those are the primary targets of this right now, because any corroborable data can make it so, for example, something like ChatGPT can happily write you an email informing customers of, you know, their next steps, which are actually part of a sophisticated scheme to steal their cryptocurrency or some of their assets they're trying to transfer into a new bank. So with chaos comes opportunity. Repair Studio says they should have invested in Nullbyte's NFTs. Yeah, I know. Really, would have been a better financial plan for them. They really messed up there. You know, lesson learned. Cryptocurrency. All right. So next up, let's talk about cryptocurrency. So ChipMixer was a platform for doing basically money laundering. This was something where ransomware actors, North Korean especially, would put all of their ransom money and then mix it around into these like tokens that would get like kind of spread out between everyone, and then withdraw them in a way that was much more difficult to trace. So by nature, cryptocurrency is pretty trackable. It's like actually pretty terrible for like getting away with a crime, because every transaction is logged by its very nature and publicly accessible. So you have to rely on these mixers to kind of jumble everything around and put all the money from a bunch of actors in a big pot, move it around, and then pay it out in order to obfuscate where this money is really going. Now, that's pretty difficult to do, and these operations tend to be fairly sophisticated and have to keep a bunch of records, which makes them prime targets for law enforcement. So this was conducted by Europol in coordination with law enforcement in Germany, BKA, and the United States. And they grabbed 7 terabytes of data and $46.5 million worth of cryptocurrency, which honestly doesn't seem like that much. Maybe I'm just desensitized to the amount of money that moves around nowadays. But it looks like the total amount of what they are able to launder is closer to 2.73 billion euros, which I imagine are somewhat similar to dollars in value. And this is, again, just a huge market for people who are making money on ransoms and need to turn it into legitimate cash. They go to these marketplaces in order to swap that around, and it makes it very easy for them, or relatively easy for them, to take these large sums of money and clean them up over a series of steps. So yeah, this was finally brought down. And if you were using ChipMixer as a way of mixing up your legitimate or ill-gotten cryptocurrency, you're going to have to find another way of doing so. All right, next story up is going to be Oh yeah, so this was from last week. Do you remember
Yep.
the U.S. Marshals data?
I do. Yeah.
Still for sale. So we won't
Ooh.
cover this too much, but
Mhm.
this is a threat actor on a Russian-speaking hacking forum is claiming to be selling 350 gigabytes from the U.S. Marshals Service, and this is stuff that is targeting extremely sensitive things. We're
Yep.
talking about aerial footage of military bases and other high-security areas, copies of passports and identification documents, and details on wiretapping and surveillance of citizens. Now, you would get arrested as hell if you were caught taking aerial footage or photos or videos of military bases. That is like I was taking pictures of a dam one time, and I got like seriously spoken to, and I was like, it's pretty, like I'm allowed here. And that's when I learned that like filming infrastructure in the United States is a big no-no. Like if you are using like high quality cameras and stuff to do it, it's required that people that work there report you basically because of concerns. So if you were able to just grab all this high resolution aerial imagery of all these facilities from one data dump, why would you ever risk going there yourself?
Right, exactly.
So this is a huge failure of intel. They were basically like, we should like see what it would be like if an adversary were to try to take all this high surveillance stuff of the most sensitive installations, and then they lost it. Like that sucks.
Yeah.
While of course it is unfortunate that some of this is secret or top secret information that could include information on convicts, gang leaders, and cartels, it also seems to potentially have information about witnesses in the witness protection program. That obviously would be of huge value to anybody, I don't know, like looking for those witnesses, like organized crime, like cartels, for example. So this is almost seems like it's being marketed towards like cartels in terms of like what is being offered online for sale and how they're presenting this information. It just like, it seems like a gift for an organization that would have the kind of money to afford this and have a strong motivation for learning what the government knows about like informants and all this other stuff. So this is a huge fire for the U.S. Marshals organization. They are definitely going to have to like figure out what's exposed here. And we reported last week that like somebody involved in a briefing stated that the FBI had purchased this data probably in an attempt to like figure out what the hell is going on here and like what information is exposed and what they need to do to protect their sources.
Oh man, this is not good. I mean, none of them are good, but like this is dangerous.
Yeah, and so this was apparently like a standalone backup system. We don't know a lot more about that, but it does seem like the information stored on this backup system was extremely sensitive, and we're still seeing the fallout from it. Man, we're almost out of time this week. There's so much stuff that happened. Let's see how much we can get back. This is gonna be short. There's a company called Essident that does primarily like wholesale, like office supplies, and they're claiming a network outage. However, Lockbit is saying that it is a attack and that they have struck them and that they have their files. So typically when we see this, one company be like, "Oh, we just got a little. We need to reboot something. We're not totally sure." And then like a ransomware operator is like, "We have their files. We will publish them." It's pretty predictable, you know, like what has happened here. Like it seems as though this company has been hit by ransomware. We don't know a lot else because the company is currently, you know, being a little bit let's say not super verbose about what exactly is going on. So we'll wait to hear here exactly what happened, but there are sometimes consequences for not being forthcoming when an event like this happens, which is a news story I hope to get to if we can. Let's see if I can. Have you read about NordVPN open sourcing its Linux VPN client?
I did very briefly. I mean, net positive thing. I mean, certainly could not hurt to add a little bit more protection. And I think it said that they're making like the is it the point-to-point ones free now too, along with it? There it is. Yeah, the private tunnel.
Yeah, that would be cool because as far as I'm aware, NordVPN has like I'm sorry to say this, but like not a stellar reputation in the hacker community after like some things that were like discovered about them a while ago about like logging and stuff like that. So like there's a lot of people who don't like NordVPN in the hacker community and are kind of vocal about that. The fact that they're open sourcing their stuff is really a step in the right direction. I think to maybe win some of those people over again because frankly, like the reputational hit like required a little bit of, you know, like community engagement. And I think this is a step in the right direction.
Yeah, I agree.
All right. Whoa, scary. So Winter Vervin, APT hackers are using a fake antivirus to install malicious files. I'll keep this pretty short. This is a Russian and Belarusian-backed organization that is simulating these cybersecurity websites for Ukraine and Poland, where they are trying to make it look as though this is a website you can go for cybersecurity resources, including an antivirus scan. Now, when you try to use the virus scanner, it in fact downloads a malicious payload using PowerShell. So not super sophisticated here. You're literally tricking people into downloading a fake virus scanner by just kind of social engineering. But this is one of the attack vectors where attackers are impersonating official state agencies that are trying to warn people about cybersecurity threats, and then in turn being a cybersecurity threat.
Yep. It's a tale as old as time. That's been around, for, I mean, Kody, you probably remember it, like the old pop-ups, like, oh, your computer is infected with a virus. Click here to download the free scanner. This is just version 2.0.
Yeah. I mean, that's exactly what it feels like. All right, next up, Microsoft has unveiled its AI-powered Microsoft 365 Copilot Assistant. I've been using like the Chat GPT assistant thing, and it is. I don't want to use Google search anymore. It's seriously a problem for their business model. Like, I don't want to go through 2 pages of results when I can get a nicely formatted summary with citations linking out to the exact sources.
Interesting.
It's incredible to me. Like, this is for now just the iOS version of Bing, but the new assistant is so capable at being able to summarize the answer to a question in a way that's like just completely useful. It's like you have like a high school senior with like 15 minutes of free time to do the search for you, read the results and summarize it in like a nice little blurb, and then cite their sources. It's really incredible. So some of these new AI tools are really going to change the way I feel that we work. So these are new tools in all Microsoft 365 apps, and some of them are claiming to do things like write up a little presentation and then have it turn it into a PowerPoint for you, which frankly, I would absolutely love for it to do that because I hate making PowerPoints.
Yeah, I know a lot of people who use the excuse I'm bad at PowerPoint to not make PowerPoint, so I'm for it. I haven't tried this out, to be honest, because, like, I mean, I think I don't want to dunk on Microsoft, not that they care and they have whatever a billion dollars, but like Bing has always been kind of not so good, so I never bothered. I kind of thought, like, to be totally honest, like, how good could it be? But I mean, I might have to try it. I mean,
I was blown away. I really didn't want to try it because for all the things that you just said. But frankly, Microsoft's investment in AI has really made them, I would say, pull ahead a little bit. Where there were a couple things where I was like, it's going to be so tedious to search Google for this. Like, I'm just going to use Bing. And it's like, man, they got me. Like, how did Bing get me? But yeah, pretty fantastic. If you've been using these tools, you probably understand like what they're capable of doing. And of course, I'm sure we'll figure out how to abuse them soon.
Yeah, I'm sure.
All right, so we are coming up on the end of the news, but let's end on something good. So if you were infected by the Conti-based ransomware affiliate Meow Corp, you've got a lucky break. It turns out somebody leaked some of the private keys here, and a group at Kaspersky was able to locate the private keys that were leaked and make a tool for free decryption of any files that were encrypted by this group. So again, this doesn't apply to all of the Conti ransomware family. This is just one specific branch. However, the use of these 258 keys probably indicates that there are perhaps 258 victims out there that would greatly benefit from this free decryptor. So a unusual but very welcome win for anybody who's been hit by one of these ransomware gangs.
There was one other story, and I think I know we're right at the top of the hour here, that I wanted to bring up too. That was related to, I think, this one, and I forget which group it was, but we had the free decryptor. One of them said, like, we're not bothering with the actual ransomware part of the ransomware anymore. It's in here somewhere, and I read that one too. Maybe it's one of these first two ones.
It was the BNLAN ransomware gang shift to pure data extortion. No more ransom, just take the data.
Yeah.
Ooh, they got really good at it too.
And that's sort of interesting. And I know I said this last week, and I know I say this all the time, is like, you can't unbreach the data. Like, and I know people last week or maybe it was 2 weeks ago when we talked about it, said, oh, restore it from backup. Like, yeah, they're not even bothering anymore once it's out the door. Because, if you think about it, we've gotten pretty good at catching some of the typical ransomware behavior. Like, ransomware always operates in a very similar way when it actually, reads and encrypts or modifies the files. And you're not really paying to unencrypt the data, right? You can restore data from backup. You can rebuild a laptop. Like, there's a minimal amount of downtime that you end up having with the actual like upfront encryption. You're really paying to not have it leaked, is more or less it. You know, for the reputational damage, the trade secret damage, all the other kind of, I'm not gonna say ancillary things. That's the primary reason. And it's interesting that we've gone almost completely full circle from the days of where like, oh, pay to get your laptop back, to like just like the heck with it. Pay us to just not leak it. So it's interesting that we've sort of, the pendulum swung the other direction finally.
Well, what's fascinating also about the story is that like it seems as though they're employing someone in their strategy that is aware of the legal and regulatory burdens on companies, to the point that they're not just being like, oh, like we're going to release your data and your customers will be so mad. They're saying like they're talking about the specific fines, regulation, whatever else the organization will face if it becomes public. So like that can be so expensive and so intimidating for a company. They're basically saying like, hey, it's in your best interest to keep this quiet. We're not going to disrupt your organization. Nobody knows about this yet, but here's a list of all the fines, regulations, lawsuits, everything that could come your way if you don't keep this quiet. And it's basically, they figured out that people will pay hush money to avoid being on the list of name and shame companies by these like less aggressive threat actors that are not trying to embarrass these companies with a ransomware attack.
And we've seen this, you know, again, this is that next evolution. We've seen this with the ones where, do we have a good comment? They poached a
ransomware investigator.
That's a good one. But I remember like, and this has been within the last few years that we've seen the rise of this too, is where when they get the data, they'll kind of go through it and they'll look and see if they can find instances of like insurance policies, like cyber insurance policies, to say like, hey, we know you're covered for up to this amount. How about you just pay us and this goes away? You know what I mean? Or even using it to go through and look for pending lawsuits and other things that are damaging, almost using the data, not even as like a direct kind of cudgel for embarrassment, but to kind of extort in new and interesting ways. So
yeah, man, I'm amazed by how this industry has evolved and how people have figured out how to make money from cybercrime in all these like interesting ways. It really shows that there's the attack where you're embarrassing someone on a public scale and you're trying to make it a big incident so they have to pay, and sometimes the FBI gets involved. And then there's the people that are figuring out how to do it in very subtle ways. It's really wild to me.
My only question is, maybe they did poach the ransomware negotiator. Did they do it through a LinkedIn ad?
Oh yeah, that would be another interesting thing if they were luring people who thought they were working for a legitimate company, and then instead they were working for a ransomware operator. All right, so that's all the time we have for today. If we intrigued you with all these stories of breaches and you want to see what an incident response looks like, you can go to varonis.com/Kody to check out our proactive incident response class. You can take a look at some of the biggest threats that the company has conquered this year. And we have a lot of other great free content on varonis.com, who is our sponsor for this stream. So thank you to them. If you have any questions, or if you're watching this on repeat, make sure to leave a comment on the Security Forward YouTube channel. And on Wednesday, I will go through and answer all of your questions in our live stream at the same time on Wednesday. So Kilian, thank you for joining us again.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, we'll
Take care, everyone.
next time. Oh, I have to end the stream still.